Welcome to InDepthNH.org's and the New Hampshire Writers Project's Storytelling and Publishing, Capturing and Sharing the Human Experience. My name is Beverly Stoddard. I write for InDepth New Hampshire, which is an independent, nonprofit news site. And we thank you for joining us. You know, we live our lives and have our experiences, and for many of us, we want to capture those stories, and then we want to share them. And we want to share them with our families and our friends. And then we decide, we want to go beyond that. We want to go escape our core group and take this story beyond. And we decide to enter the path of publishing these stories. Tonight, we will explore the creative process by talking with our amazing panelists and how they have traveled this journey. And let me introduce them to you. We start with Macherie Chappell. She is the chairperson of the Board of Trustees of New Hampshire's largest writing group, the New Hampshire Writers Project. Macherie is an intuitive consultant, a story guide, and an award-winning author and playwright. She is also an indie publisher and the owner of Portal Star Publishing. And she's my friend as well.
Hello.
Say hello. Yes, thank you, Macherie. New friends include Jean Duffy, who is with us tonight as the author of Soccer Grannies, the South African women who inspire the world. Jean is a nonfiction writer with published essays in the Boston Globe and the Concord Monitor. Jean can be found on the soccer field in Lexington, Massachusetts, where her team, the L'Expressas, have been playing for some 20 years. And I believe you're wearing your jersey tonight too, right, Jean?
I am.
There we go, yay team. Then let me go to Bev Stoll, who is a nonfiction writer. And Bev, quite frankly, had a front row seat with history. With her 24 years as assistant to the father of linguistics, Noam Chomsky, an MIT linguistics professor emeritus, a human rights and political activist, philosopher, and cognitive scientist. Bev's book is about all of those years that she spent with him. Chomsky and Me, a Memoir. And fun fact, I know she won't mind me telling, but a fun fact about Bev is she does stand-up comedy also. And finally, I'd like to introduce Laura Beretsky with us tonight. She is the author of Seizing Control, Managing Epilepsy and Others' Reactions to It. It's a powerful title, which describes the challenges of living with epilepsy. Her website says, the book explores the sacrifices we make and risks we take to live or appear to live a normal life, and gives hope to those who fear their path to fulfillment might be impossible to navigate. That's a story I'm anxious to hear all about. So here's what we have on the agenda tonight, folks. The first half hour is going to be about all of the stories, how these fine ladies found them, how did they arrive at them, what happened in their lives that led to a book. The second half hour is how did they get it published? What path did they take? And the final half hour will be about all of your questions, and I know you'll have a lot. So let's have some fun tonight. Let's learn something, and let's get solutions to how to get published in a world where traditional publishing accepts 1% to 2% of all manuscripts. Keeps us not in great odds. And finally, we're going to figure out, do we want to just publish through Amazon or another service that's absolutely free? And so we will begin. Please note, we will be staying on time as best we can. I'll do my best to keep us on time. And the first up tonight is Miss Macherie Chappell, the author of the book, The Oracle Files, Escape. Macherie, please take the floor.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. My novel, The Oracle Files, was a spinoff of my first book, The Descendant, which was about my family and the colorism issue that lies within the African American community, because it began with a statement my mother made about her sister, calling her High Yella. And from there, I wrote The Descendant because I wanted to understand my family and why there was that type of dissension. But from that, there was the whole story of the blue veins, which exist and existed back then. And it's African Americans who pass for white, but you can see their blue veins on their forearms. And so they had their own community, and their own stores, schools, and so forth. And the Oracle Files is about a slave who passes for white, who was adopted into a Quaker community, but she ends up starting a Blue Vein Society when she and her husband have to find a way to exist between the two worlds of Black and white. And it turns out that she's also very psychic, which is my contribution to her character. But I really wanted to address and have the conversation about what it means to straddle those worlds, the Black and the white, when you're Black but you pass for white, and how you are perceived and received by the African American community, because I felt and I feel that there is a bit of a, I don't want to call it hypocrisy, but I feel that colorism is its own difficult form of discrimination and racism, and I find it troubling. And so I wrote the book to explore that, and also to address the use of the N-word in my book for the whole series, which will be 3 books and will total more than 1,000 pages. The
Wow.
N-word is used only once, and when it does, it has dire consequences. So that's how I came to write my that book. It was a spinoff of somewhat of an autobiographical book. It was a fictional book based on true events. It was easier to do it that way. And there's the Blue Vein Society there, and the Blue Vein Society is now the central focus of the Oracle Files.
I had never heard of the Blue Vein Societies. That's new information for me.
Not too many people have, because it was something that was secretive. You probably have heard of the paper bag test.
Yes.
Well, the Blue Veins never had to do, they had a ruler test. Your hair had to be straight like a ruler. But the blue vein on the forearm was the deciding factor if you fit into their society or not. And they had their whole community, their network, their high society, their schools, and they fit in without letting anyone know that they were truly African, that they had Black roots. So there's a dichotomy for the character, Elizabeth Beeson Chase, who passes for white and wants to save her people, particularly her mother, who hates her because she's a representation of a rape from the white master. And so it's a very layered story with a lot of psychic phenomenon about ghosts, because there is a ghost who chases after Elizabeth from a past life. So it's a very layered story, but I think that the human issue of self-acceptance and the issue of racism is looked at from a very spiritual and psychic perspective.
Awesome. It seems that it's timely. It's always going to be timely. It just seems that there's always going to be a discussion or an understanding of ghosts or passing or whatever it is that, all the different layers that you're speaking about. So thank you, Mashri. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you.
At some point in time, I'd like to also later down the road, just get a brief description of what an intuitive consultant is and a story guide. And maybe we can do that in the last half hour, if that, okay?
That will be fine, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. All right. And so next we have Miss Jean Duffy, who is going to speak about soccer and this amazing woman called Mama Becca. Mama Becca. So Jean, would you just please tell us about how you found your story?
Sure, yes. Good evening, everyone. So I took up soccer in my early 40s. I was on the sidelines in Lexington, Massachusetts, watching my daughters play. I thought to myself, that looks like fun. I can run 5 miles. Surely I can run and chase a soccer ball. Fortunately, I found a group of women just starting up, and in no time I was hooked. It was my first team sport of any kind in my mid-40s. I didn't know at that point, but just a few years after I started playing, a group of women in Limpopo, South Africa, women in their 40s to 80s, even older than me, took to the playing field. These women have survived challenging lives, but with their abundant strength and resiliency, they have continued on. They also exude a joy for life, whether they're singing and dancing or chasing the soccer ball. Their first team sport at 40 to 80 years old. Clearly, it's never too late to start something new. In 2010, our lives would intersect. South Africa was hosting the FIFA World Cup, the first time on African soil. And this South African team of grandmothers found themselves in the international spotlight as the perfect human interest story accompanying the World Cup. And reporters were flocking to Limpopo to tell their story. My Massachusetts team stumbled on one of those news clips, and we felt an instant bond. Our two teams would come together and play soccer on both sides of the Atlantic. Shortly after that amazing experience of meeting these women, a soccer friend said, someone should write a book. Planted a seed in the back of my brain. In my mid-50s, this engineer who'd never written more than emails and the occasional technical report took a first creative writing class. So how did I approach the story, telling the story of the soccer grannies? Well, for my first draft, I drew largely on emails I had squirreled away and interviews with my soccer teammates, tapping into their memories. Writing classes helped me learn how to craft vivid scenes with lively verbs. Once I had a first draft of the complete book, 4 years after that first creative writing class, I sought out to writing professionals to give me feedback on how to make my manuscript stronger. From their varied suggestions, I used my judgment of what felt right to me and focused on 2 primary ideas. The first suggestion that I embraced was to build the reader's interest in these South African women by describing the societal and political forces that impacted their lives. I dug in, and with the guidance of a South African social historian, I learned about that. And the more I learned, the more I felt compelled to share their story with the world. The second suggestion was to weave in more of my life story so that the reader would care about the narrator, essentially moving my book more towards a memoir. That was the harder of the 2 suggestions because it was a struggle for me to think, what's interesting about my life? But I dug deep and I did my best. Quite late in the writing process, I received transcripts of interviews with 8 grannies who graciously shared their life stories with me. And I cried reading each one. I wove in their stories as interludes, breaks from the narrative in process, and their life stories, those stories within the book are my favorite part of the book. So 8 years after that first creative writing class, I'm excited, very excited to hold a published book. And they even put my name on the cover.
Imagine they did. And you made a great friend though, right?
Yes. Yes, Becca Nitsan-Risi was the founder of the team, and she's a longtime community activist, has won many awards, and was a radio talk show host, actually, where people would call in with their problems, and she would help find resources to make their lives better. She was at 35, she was diagnosed with colon cancer.
Mm.
And she was in the hospital, but Becca being Becca, she didn't focus on her own struggles, but instead looked outward and saw a lot of elderly women in the hospital suffering from stress-related old age injuries. And she said, why are all these women here? And the doctors said they need exercise. And so they started exercising and found their way to soccer. That's
Very good. It's a lovely journey. It's a lovely journey. Okay, thank you so much, Jean. And now we're on to Bev Stoll. She's up next, and she's going to talk about life with Noam Chomsky. So, Bev, please tell us all about him.
Okay, so of course, now I'm going to lose my voice.
And we all do.
So two things triggered my book and sent me on my journey. The first was the subject of my book, Noam Chomsky, emeritus professor of MIT. When I saw who he was, what he did, and the people in his world, I had no choice but to write. I had to let people know about this person. To me, he was a self-actualized human being. You don't get to work with many of those. And the other was the importance I saw in truth telling. So as a nonfiction writer, I saw it takes courage, I know, for writers to bare their souls, to make themselves vulnerable. Sharing the truth of our experiences, by the way, is the only way we can be trusted narrators. Truth makes for provocative storytelling, makes our writing more powerful, and connects us to our readers. So I decided I'm just going to go all in. There were some secrets that I had that I didn't really want to share. I didn't want to be judged. One, I think the most important one was that I became pregnant with my son at 17. And that was a story that I kept to myself for a long time. I was a straight A student. I didn't want to be judged. But I decided through the help of my writing buddies that I would be honest about it and put it in, because if I show my vulnerabilities, then the reader is going to know that they're not alone. That seemed very important. Excuse me. So this is why I studied to become a therapist, and this is why I write, for the truth. About my memoir, Chomsky and Me, and how I came to write it. So in my 20s, my younger brother, Paul, one of the brilliant minds at MIT, was a PhD in physics, where he suggested I applied for a job. So after 14 years working my way up, I decided to work my way back down so that I could get a master's degree in psychology. And the lower position that I took was as Noam Chomsky's office manager.
Imagine, that's considered
Crazy.
entry level.
I think it's drying in here. It's not my office. So for those of you who don't know Noam Chomsky, he revolutionized the field of linguistics. He greatly influenced the fields of cognitive science, psychology, as Bev said earlier, sociology, biology, biochemistry, genetics, history, you name it. I mean, I don't think there are many fields that he hasn't touched. He was also a revolutionary in social science, social justice, and human rights. I like to say that at 94, almost 95, he's one of the world's oldest hippies. A hell no, we won't go kind of guy. He and Howard Zinn had started this whole thing during the Vietnam War, saying, you know, we don't have to have war. And that was at a time when the media and all of that, nobody liked to hear that war wasn't a good thing. I mean,
Right.
think of our fathers, our grandfathers. So like memoir, Noam Chomsky is about the truth, managing the works and travels of this guy, a man who is compared to Newton, Aristotle, was supposed to be my easy job, and it was not. As for my plan to become a therapist, I was good at counseling people, but my heart was too soft. So I took a breath and I left my master's degree. And then I turned my focus back into my office because I was only supposed to be there 3 years, not 24. And it was as if I had landed on Oz, everything colorized. And it was beautiful. And I thought, who is this man? What is this job? Who are these people coming into our office? Because it wasn't just him. It was all the visitors. What is this place? So I learned quickly that the study of linguistics was really the least of it. I needed to find humor in this atmosphere of dark scenarios and tipping points. I mean, there was really a lot of scary stuff that came across my desk. So in order to do that and preserve my sanity, I started a blog focusing on the lighter side of what happened. You know, yeah, he's this typical smart guy, you know, who forgets to do things and, you know, doesn't know how to make coffee, you know, and all of that funny stuff. But so I tried to keep it light. And I realized in the process that he has a sense of humor, and I brought it out in him and he brought it out in me. And my writing was focusing on the humor. He'd ask me things before an interview like, Bev, what's the definition of courage? Or, hey, can we count our thoughts? You know, so it kind of played with my mind a little bit. And there were a lot of physical puzzles and things like that. He once asked me he told me that his garage door opener was broken. So I went over and pressed the unlock key. And then he told me his printer was broken and I pressed print. He told me something else was broken and it was just the simplest thing, but he thought I was brilliant. So I didn't argue with him and I didn't try to explain what he was doing. So, but as I blogged, so I blogged about all of these things long before I decided to make it a book, although it was always in the back of my mind. But as I blogged, a really interesting thing happened. Activists, people who are generally depressed, overwhelmed, and fatigued and burned out, told me that revealing my Uber activist boss as a human being who played with kids and joked with me gave them permission to live their lives a little bit more in a more balanced way. It gave them permission to not burn out, to not get depressed. So that was my impetus for continuing to write. So I think, yeah, I've done stand-up comedy, as you said, not necessarily so much now, but I do tend to go there. I do try to grab the funny thing.
Well, you know, the funny thing, Bev, is Nancy West, our publisher and executive editor of InDepth, she does stand up. So, and I think there's something in our future. All right. Something's coming up in our future.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bev.
Sure.
All right. And Laura, and hi, Laura.
Hey.
Will you now talk about your book? And I have the sacrifices and the hope that you found and you know, and finally found, and I'm so anxious to hear about it. And like I said, I think the title of the book is by all means the most thought-provoking title, one of the most I've ever read. So please join us. And you're a new author yourself, brand new, right?
Brand new, debut.
Okay, Laura, tell us how'd you decide to do this?
Thank you. Thanks to InDepth New Hampshire and New Hampshire's Writers Project for having us here tonight to speak about storytelling and why we write and what compels us. We write to make sense of things, to track things, to process things. Another driving force compelling authors to document our truths, as Bev mentioned, is that we hope to share them with larger audiences. I'm in a Zoom room full of writers, so maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but so be it. I initially wrote some sections of my memoir decades ago, just trying to track those childhood memories just for my own records. I actually began writing Seizing Control in earnest in 2017 at a Grove Street writing class. My book, Seizing Control, it's a medical memoir that outlines my journey managing epilepsy, others' reactions to my uncontrollable seizures, and the intense invasive brain surgeries I underwent, which ultimately allowed me to gain control of my condition. Telling any story and publishing a book requires patience, perseverance, and a thick skin. Authors make a conscious choice to bare their hearts and souls and fully expose themselves when they publish a book. Exposure runs a little deeper in the memoir genre. We choose to make ourselves vulnerable because we're so driven to share our stories that we're willing to tolerate vulnerable uneasiness to get those stories out there. I had two primary motivations to tell my story. I wrote Seizing Control partly because I wanted to increase awareness about epilepsy and what a bear it is to manage. I knew I'd be exposing myself, my family of origin, my husband and kids, my medical providers, but I had no choice about taking those risks on. I just needed to get that message and that awareness elevation out there. Epilepsy has millennia's worth of stigmas attached to it. So managing others' reactions to witnessing a seizure is part of managing epilepsy. For me, it was actually the hardest part. I knew what it took to recover from a complex partial seizure. I wasn't sure what others in my social orbits, friends, family members, colleagues, passersby, dates,
Right,
might think of me after observing me in the throes of a seizure. I understand that witnessing a seizure is often scary for the observer, but I had too many experiences when people's fears or preconceptions about seizures and epilepsy left me feeling judged, sometimes even by those who cared about me the most. I wrote Seizing Control in hopes that my story might allay fears and dispel mysteries about seizures and epilepsy. Although my book is about epilepsy's challenges, anybody who manages a perceptible medical condition while trying to fit in and appear normal faces their own version of this obstacle. And while we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, that provides a critical advocacy tool to help overcome these obstacles, my journey with epilepsy taught me that the legislation's fundamental goal cannot be achieved without a major cultural shift that increases society's tolerance, empathy, and courage in the face of others' differences. I like to think that writing and publishing Seizing Control takes a small but important step in that direction. My second impetus for Seizing Control is to increase patient empowerment by encouraging people to closely communicate and collaborate with their medical providers. Playing an active role in one's healing and healthcare management is critical to patients' well-being. My book includes descriptions of dozens of doctor's appointments, hospital visits, even a couple of brain surgeries.
Wow.
My medical journey was intense, but my ultimate outcome was fantastic. So I do it again. I was motivated to share the lessons I learned, as I think they're valuable to anyone who's recovering from a major medical procedure or managing a chronic illness. Regardless of diagnosis, our doctor's textbook knowledge and hands-on experience are critical to patients' well-being, but they're only one piece of the equation for obtaining excellent healthcare. It's also critical that patients bring lists of symptoms, side effects, and questions to their appointments so they can discuss them with their practitioners. While our doctor's expertise is essential, as patients, we're the best experts on what's going on inside our bodies. Strong patient self-advocacy is critical to ensuring optimal treatment plans. So my other driving force was sharing this valuable lesson, which I think is useful for a much, much wider audience than just folks with epilepsy.
Right. Oh, I think it's it's going to have an amazing reach for folks who have epilepsy or are family members, or they know of somebody that has this. And it's funny, I have Emily Dickinson poems on my bedroom wall, and she was known to, or is said to have had epilepsy, and she secreted herself away in her house her whole life. And that's what I think of as if only she's an amazing, anyway. I know I really give you kudos for sharing everything you're doing, and I think it'll go well. I do. I think you're going to help reach people and help people. So well done. Nicely said, ladies. I appreciate that. That was a great session. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to the publishing part of the event and get to the heart of the presentation of presenting real life examples shared by our panelists. And we want to look at the traditional form first, that you go to a traditional publisher. Hopefully you have an agent, and then we'll move to independent publishing, and finally the benefits of free publishing. So Bev, I'd like you to start with this, if you would be so kind. Will you talk about your publisher, how you found them? How did you convince them to take your book on?
Well, I actually did not have an agent. No, I did not. I wanted one. I tried to get one, and I ended up being connected to my publisher, OR Books, through my editor, my longtime editor. I've been working with him for about a year. So that was, and I'm not sure if it's good or bad to have, the fact that I don't have an agent, but that's not the point at the moment. We'll see.
No, and I think that's a minority position, that people that do have agents, I think they go straight to publishers or small publishing houses to get their work done. But even then, even that's hard to get done.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I think to start with the reality, the 6 of us in our group, we're 3, have all experienced lags at some point where we tired of researching and querying well-suited agents only to have our somewhat published manuscripts rejected over and over again. That was difficult, but I think it's really how it is, even for Stephen King. A filmmaker, I know through my job, I met through my job, introduced me to many London connections. So I put this network to the test. I queried dozens of London agents and publishers, and Chomsky was very popular in London, even more than in the US. He was voted top world intellectual in the UK in 2005. And most of the English agents I contacted asked to read my book. And I was like, oh, good, I've got this nailed. That's going to be great. Gave me confidence. They read it. They called it singular, funny, sneakily educational, quirky, honest, and poignant. So I thought my book would be picked up no problem. And I spent 6 months, interviewing with them and having Zoom meetings. But the problem was, in the end, that these contacts were all in London. They said, since Gnome was in America and our stories in the US, that we should start there, which confused me because they already knew this when they asked me for all of my information.
Right.
They just wanted to see what was out there. I don't know. You can't second guess this stuff, I guess.
Right.
So, and I also figured out that the people in London calling my book brilliant really just meant very good in the United States. That's just a word they throw around.
Well, they use brilliant a lot, oh, that's so brilliant.
Yeah, that dinner was brilliant.
Yeah.
So one of those London publishers, the OR Books guy, Colin Robinson, also had an office in New York, which, as we know, is in the US. So I figured, well, maybe he'll publish me because he's in the US. And he may have taken me on, but I made a real rookie mistake. He asked me whether he could meet Noam Chomsky and talk to him, get on the line and talk to him about my project. And being knowing Noam Chomsky's, we have the freedom of speech and all of this, I kind of pulled a Noam Chomsky and said, well, why do you need to ask Noam Chomsky about my book? This is my book, not his book. And anyway, that ended that conversation. So
I'm not sure that's a rookie mistake. I think that's your prerogative to say, hey, it's my book.
Well, it was only a rookie mistake in retrospect when I realized that kind of shut the door. But it only, shut the door for a little while. Anyway, his name was Colin Robinson at OR Books. And let's see. And the other thing, it's good that they actually didn't ask me for anything more, because I realized at that point that I had rushed into it and I hadn't finished my proposal. I had a great query letter. I had a lot of great chapters that I was happy with, but I didn't know my marketing plan. I didn't have blurbs and that sort of thing. So I didn't know who my targeted audience was. So I had to kind of back up, and that gave me a minute to sort of, breathe and say, okay, you didn't waste 5 months. You're doing okay. Just keep going. I cut 5,000 words because when they tell you cut, you have to cut. And I got to work querying US agents. I probably queried only about 25 or 30. And I know in my group, some people have done 90, 50, 90, 100.
Really? So 30 is a minor number.
It seems to be. It seems to be. So meanwhile, I continued working with my editor that I had hired. We tweaked, we tightened, and I realized when I talked to him that other publishers were going to do the same thing. They were going to ask, is this okay with Noam Chomsky? If it's memoir, I had to be careful as a well-known person. So I thought, okay. It just so happened that I was going in for open heart surgery, and I thought, I'm going to play the surgery card. And I'm going to write him and say, hey, Noam, I'm going in for open heart surgery. Will you okay my book and give me your blessings?
Will you write me a letter? Yeah.
Yeah, he said, I don't need to write a letter. So he said, I give you my blessing. So he did. And that kind of freed me up, I think, to say, okay, I'm ready to go forward with that. And then I learned, so that was in December, and in May, on my birthday, I got a phone call that the guy who had asked if he could talk to Noam, who had, by the way, published him in the past, was going to publish my book. So 5 months into my healing, I found out on my birthday that almost had a heart attack, though. That was
Oh, no. See, that's the stand-up coming out in you now.
So anyway, I ended up cutting about 14,000 more words. So my book had started off at 100,000, which we know is crazy,
Wow.
and
Wow.
ended up at 72. But then I managed to put a few things in. It was a bit of a tug of war. So finally, my book was officially published this year. And I wish I could tell you that holding it in my hands for the first time is beautiful, but I was exhausted. And it was more like when I held my son for the first time. I mean, there was this feeling of euphoria, but at the same time, I thought, why does he look like a gray pumpkin? You know, the magic was like not quite there yet.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I persevered. I overcame my questions of doubt. And I want to tell everybody listening here that if you do keep moving forward, your pumpkin will become a beautiful book.
And, and I think the lesson we'll take, if we take something from each person, that don't stop at 10 queries, 20 queries, 30, and you're saying, get 90 out there if it happened, if you need to.
You need to.
Really work it, really work it. Well
Yes.
done, well said,
Yeah.
Bev. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And Jean, I have you up next. You have a similar path to Bev, but you don't have Noam Chomsky is well known. He's a famous individual. You don't have that with Mama Becca and soccer. And so what was your path to publishing?
So, yeah, I created and refined the standard pitch collateral for my Soccer Granny's manuscript, a query letter. I had my list of comparable books and my polished first pages as best as I could make them. And I also assembled a book proposal. For a narrative nonfiction book, a book proposal might or might not be needed. It depends on the preferences of individual agents and publishers, but I wanted to be ready just in case. And in hindsight, documenting pieces like who is my target audience and how will I market my book was a beneficial exercise. So pitch collateral in hand, I researched agents who had represented books about sports or inspirational women or just general narrative nonfiction. I scoured manuscript wish list where some agents expressed their interests. I found articles with helpful lists like 20 top agents for memoir and 25 nonfiction debuts. I also signed up for a temporary membership with Publishers Marketplace and dug into that database, starting with my list of comparables and finding the agent and publisher for each, and then what other agents landed books with those publishers. And I compiled all those names into a big list. Being a geeky engineer, I made a colorful spreadsheet to track my agent queries. I scoured their websites and added to my spreadsheet pertinent details of how they want to be queried and when and if you can check back on the status of your query. And I closely followed their submission preferences. In total, I sent some 50 query letters to agents, the majority of whom never responded.
Not even a no thank you.
No, a handful of those, but mostly just nothing. So my game plan was to send 100 queries and then move on to contacting independent publishers who would take queries directly without an agent. But I didn't get that far. A writing colleague offered to make an introduction to a set of agents she knew personally. And 4 out of the 5 of those agents asked for manuscript pages.
Oh,
Were they genuinely interested, or was it out of respect for my writing colleague? Probably more of the latter, because in the end, all of those agents passed with various kind words. But one said, and keep in mind, it only takes one, I hope you don't mind, but I mentioned your project to a publisher who loves soccer books. She hoped I wouldn't mind.
yeah, right.
So I contacted that publisher at Rowman and Littlefield, and she asked for my proposal, which fortunately I had ready. And after the reviewing the proposal, she said she was interested if I would be willing to shift the focus even more to the soccer grannies and cut all that stuff about Jean, leave in just enough Jean to tell the story. So I edited the first 3 chapters to demonstrate, that I understood her vision.
Mhm.
Yeah, remember all that writing about Jean that I had painstakingly added? Well, someone else may have wanted more Jean. It's very subjective, right? But snip, snip, paragraphs and pages fell to the cutting room floor. On the positive side, I was able to publish a couple of essays using those pieces, so the work didn't go to waste.
Mm,
Publisher
right.
was pleased with my 3 edited chapters. While this publisher was open to working with me directly or through an agent, I decided to circle back to the agent who had mentioned my project, and I signed her on. I wanted her negotiating expertise, and I also wanted someone who could potentially line up, next deals on foreign translations, the audio,
Right.
perhaps one day the Soccer Grannies movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So as I look back on it, not only did I benefit from a series of helpful introductions, but my agent and publisher and I all share a passion for soccer. My agent plays recreational soccer like me, and the publisher played on the U.S. women's national team.
Wow.
Relationships and connections, intentional or not, really make a difference, right?
Yes, boy, oh boy, that's what I'm taking from what you're saying also, is that network, and focus, because you have soccer and it is worldwide favorite sport. So you have that to help carry you forward. The other thing I wanted to mention about what you're doing is, in one of your newsletters, you said you had a plan to market your book every week for 52 weeks.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right or wrong?
Yeah, I have a goal of 52 book clubs or circle of friends, kind of smaller session.
Yeah. So you were you said you were in Plastow last night at the library, but that's another takeaway. If you do get lucky to get your book published or you publish a book, are you prepared to do what it takes to market it? Are you prepared to go out once a week for the next 52 weeks, schlep all around New England? Yes. So that's the message I took from your newsletter. So thank you, Jean. That was a great story. And now we're going to move on to Laura. And Laura, you went a whole different route. You went through an independent publisher. Would you explain what that means, what it entails, and why you chose the company that you chose?
Sure, gladly. I wouldn't say it wasn't quite all that different at the beginning. First, I'm going to say what I said before, which is publishing a book requires patience, perseverance, and a thick skin. And that goes for the storytelling and the exposure and the vulnerability, but that also goes for the process that Jean just described, the getting the word out there, and pushing it. I began writing this in the fall 2017. As I said, it was at a Grub Street writing class where I really started in earnest with this book. I took several memoir writing classes over the years, and then fell in with my ongoing writing group. 3 of the 6 of us, half of us are here tonight, actually. In spring of 2020, I hired a Grub Street editor who helped me shape the structure of the book. And then several months later, I shared a draft version of the completed manuscript with a different editor. She gave me 9 pages of feedback, things that she tweaked, changed, what have you. Over time, taking all this feedback in, I think I have 6 versions of my manuscript saved on the computer. So after incorporating all this feedback, I started the query process kind of similar to Jean's. I had a book proposal. I had Excel spreadsheets with details about each agent and each press. I tailored my query letters based on the recipient's interest, based on who they'd represented in the past. I sent out queries to 78 literary agents and then to 34 small presses. So a total of 114 submissions before I
So
found a publisher.
you live in Massachusetts, right?
Yes.
Did you just stay in the New England area or did you send wherever?
Wherever. No, I looked at comps and comparables and saw who represented what. I looked at Query Tracker, all those articles that Jean mentioned. We shared them with each other, so I probably looked at the same ones, and picked from the list poets and writers, indies, all the places where they list agents who are looking. I'd look at those agents, their profiles, and say, oh, who might be a good match for my book? And as I said, 78 agents and 34 small presses.
Wow.
I received 41 explicit rejections, but I never heard a peep from 73 of them. Those are what I call the implicit rejections. I generally moved folks into the rejection category on my Excel spreadsheet after 2 to 3 months. I kind of had a system.
Is that when you decided then to move into going into the independent publishing route?
I mean, that it's so interesting. Haley's, I when I got lots of rejections from the agents, I started the small presses too. And I queried a couple hybrids. I actually got a bite from She Writes, which is a very well-established hybrid press, and Haley's, kind of close in time to each other. In early 22, it was She Writes who wrote to me first. They're a reputable California-based hybrid. And I had several email exchanges back and forth with a staff member there. But typical of the hybrid model, She Writes required a large upfront fee before walking in the door, before they even start working with you. At that time, I think it was $8,500. I believe it's gone up to $9,000. And that's just to sort of get them to represent you. That they don't do anything.
You haven't done anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a few months after, there was we chatted and it was understood I could go with them. And a couple months later, I heard from Haley's Publishing, which is a small independent press in Western Mass. I did my due diligence. I actually researched both places, more research on She Writes just because they're bigger. I spoke with several authors who'd used Haley's, who'd used She Writes rather. With Haley's, I also spoke, I actually heard about them from a family friend that they're small enough that I actually would have missed them. But a friend said, oh, I published through them. And so I might have, like I said, I wanted, that was a point. That was an influencing point.
So you went with them, and she is, so does that mean that you then have to pay her as well? You said 8,500 on the other one, or?
That was She Writes, yeah.
Mhm.
Although Haley's is not a hybrid, they do request that their authors share the book publishing expenses. They're a small independent press. And while they're much smaller than a place like She Writes, and it was sort of a pay as you go kind of thing, as opposed to She Writes, walk in the door, give them 8,500 just to get them to sit down and take your project on.
Right. So how did you have a budget for this? Did you decide, well, this is what I want to spend?
I didn't have a number in mind, but I have to say that big price tag just to start working with She Writes was a little, that was a factor, right? That's a little off-putting. Whereas with the publisher I wound up using, it's a very collaborative arrangement, like an agreement that sort of outlines who pays what. So it's a 70-30 split of expenses and profits, revenues.
Okay.
And that was clearly that,
You get the 30 and they get the 70.
Other way around.
Oh, you
But
get
I pay the 70 too. It's 70-30 for both output and income.
Well, can I ask how much you ended up paying for this?
You can. I mean, I'm not there yet because as I said before we started, my book, it's not gone to press yet, but I can tell you that to date, I've paid about just under $2,100.
Okay.
Nothing.
just to get the book to this point. And that's just to Haley's. That doesn't count for, like, I maintain a website, right?
Mhm.
And in fact, I paid a consultant to help me do that. So that's like a significant chunk of money. But for my Haley's expenses to date have been a couple $1,000s. I know but that's, there's no books to press yet. We're about to get into that piece of it.
And then will you get copies or do you have to buy the copies?
No, I have to buy the copies. It's a 70-30 split, and I have to do all the marketing and sell the books from my website or at events like, like Jean and Bev went to last night.
Yeah.
I hopefully I have a couple lined up, fluid dates because I don't have a book yet, but
Mhm.
I do intend to get out there. But I'd say as I said before, it's worth noting that I heard about Haley's from this distant family friend, and I would have overlooked them because it's such a small operation, maybe, a handful of books a year. But this friend said, oh, I worked with them, I like them. And so tell everybody, I guess,
Well, and, I don't think that's an unreasonable amount to go into independent publishing, and that it is your share so far.
Mhm.
I have a friend that got tied into somebody in New York, and they were at $15,000 before they knew it. And
Right.
this company was demanding $5,000 before they would do anything each time. All right,
Each
here's
time,
5. We need
right.
another 5. We need another 5. That's
Yeah.
why I worry about new writers who go into these different type of publishing companies with you have to go in with your eyes open. It's going to cost you money, but that's what you choose. That's what I chose on the path with my book. I had a
Mhm.
$3,000 budget, and that's what I got. And so it's all a choice in how you want to proceed. But again, I think your topic is just so spot on with people and the needs that are going, and people who have epilepsy. And I've had some experience in my own life with it, and it's a frightening, and it's really something we need to know more about. We don't know enough about that. So
Well, I'm hoping to change that with this book.
you
And
will.
what I tell the writers attending is to just be prepared for that roller coaster ride, because
Very good.
you
Very good.
when I would send off those queries, especially when I came across an agent or press that looked like a good match, I would be like so revved, so excited.
Yeah.
They're gonna, how can they not go for my book?
How can
It's
they? I
such a
know.
perfect match. I'd be at the
All
top of the
right.
roller coaster. And then boom, the rejection pile, or the crickets, the no word back. And
I know, I used to save my rejections. Anyway, thank you, Laura. That was very informative. I appreciate it. And so we move on to Masherie, who is an independent publisher. So she has a lot that she can share with us. And again, she runs the New Hampshire's largest writing organization, and we offer certain ways. So you're an independent publisher, Masherie, Portal Star, and you are really familiar with, is it Ingram Spark? That is
Yes.
a publishing type of program. Can you just start and share with us in that regards? First, about your own company to begin with.
Well, I started Portal Star Publishing. It grew from my being a professional story guide for authors. And in a session with an author, I was guided to publish his book. I was like, nah, I barely wanted to do what I was doing in terms of helping someone write their book, but I got into it and I said, oh, I really like this. And it was like, no, publish his book. And I said, yeah, how? And so I already had a intuitive consultation business called Portal Star, my Portal Star, and I do emotional block removal. My intuition then moved into the story guide element of being able to hear, see, and know someone's story that they're working on. I would get information, I could hear dialogue, I would know the trajectory, that type of thing. But it began with me being a story guide, well, what I thought was just a writing coach, but it became I became a story guide. And then it was, now you're a publisher. And I was like, no, I'm not. And they said, yes, you are. I said, no, I'm not. And my friend who was on the, my client was on the other end of the screen watching me have this intuitive battle, say, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. And I said, they want me to publish your book. And he said, yeah, that sounds right. And I said, okay, so I guess that's what we're doing. And so my publishing company, we have a mission. I have a mission for it. And that is to find stories that elevate and enlighten the human consciousness and deliver a more compassionate and insightful look into humanity. I work on every story. I want to ensure that every story has the highest level of, there's normally something intuitive or psychic about it. So I have that background, so I get to help lay that blueprint and provide insight into that realm in the storytelling. So my authors, I work as a story guide. I get paid as a story guide. When they're done with the book, they get all of the money that they charge for their book, that's theirs. I don't get anything. For me, it's somewhat of a co-op situation because the goal is the story. It's to find that story that will enlighten, that will change, that will elevate human consciousness, the sense of humanity, and from a very spiritual and psychic perspective. So I did, as some of you have, I did do the route of reaching out to literary agents, and for years, for my first book, they were like, oh my gosh, this is very interesting. I'm just not sure how to classify it. And I actually got picked up by Writers House. And they're a very big literary agency. They do a lot of book to film. And they were running to my book for the pitch, for the new client pitch. And he asked me, did you self-publish this? And I said, yes. And he says, do you have a contract? I said, a 24-hour one, I can be out of it. And that I never heard back from him. And that was for my first book, The Descendant. With the Oracle Files, the Oracle Files came out of a meeting with a literary agent who read book 3 of the Oracle Files, because I wrote book 3, and then she says, I really am interested to hear about Elizabeth, your main character. What was her childhood like, et cetera, et cetera. So she said, can you write a book, show it conveying that? And I said, give me a few weeks. And so I wrote the book in probably 4 or 5 weeks and sent it to her. And she said, I don't want the psychic stuff though. And I said, what part of, I won't say what I said, but I knew that I wasn't willing to compromise. I knew that I wasn't willing to give it up. And one of the things that I advocate and why I do what I do is because I have, as the chair of New Hampshire Writers Project, and when I would produce the theater readings for Hatbox, where we would take the first 20 pages and have an actor read it, but I would edit it first. And then we give it to the actor to read before a live audience. So the author would then get the feedback. They could hear their work and give and receive the feedback from the audience. And I learned at that time that I had a really good ear for dialogue, for storyline, but most importantly, structure. And so now I take all that and I gift it to my clients. And sometimes I do some pro bono work, but the purpose is I want a good story. I want something I haven't read before. Don't send me something cliche. And if I look at you and say, I don't care, because we've got to work on it, and we've got to dig a little deeper to find the true story and get out of the cereal box story. You know, you open it up, you pour it into a bowl, and there you have your story.
Right.
So my goal in working with authors and to produce literary product that is unique and special and multi-layered and very dimensionalized. Layers is one thing, dimensionalized is something else, is so that when you're done reading it, you sit there and you say, what did I just read? Oh my God, I want that experience, because
Yeah.
that's the experience that will change the way someone perceives how they look into the world.
Well,
And
it sounds like you're taking their books to different planes of existence.
exactly, I have, because I have the intuitive ability and that whole spiritual aspect of myself, I'm able to do that. And the last time I spoke to an agent was at my own conference, and we had this great lunch, and I talked about some of my psychic experience, and it was like, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow. And I said, okay, I set them up. And so now when I go to talk to them about my story, there'll be a piece of cake. Not so much. They had already formed, in the two of them had already decided where I was going to go, in this teeny tiny little box on this little shelf called self-help. Now, I have to say, when I heard them say, no, we think you belong in self-help, I thought they said, no, you are the help. And I was like, wait, what?
You're the
Pardon
help.
me? Pardon me? And they said, no, self-help. And I was like, okay, don't make me get out of my chair now. But even that, to me, I found offensive. And I'll tell you why. When I feel open like this, and someone says, no, just do this and we'll feel comfortable. That's when that was the day. And I didn't care. I said, on my way home from the event, I gave him a phone call and I said, so let me tell you what's not going to happen. I'm not coming your way. I'm not going into self-help, because what I have to say is bigger than that. And I don't want to be minimized for your comfort or the publishing world's comfort. That's not who I am. So first thing I learned that day was that to know myself, know what I was willing to accept and not accept. And I wasn't willing to accept being less than when I have seen so much. And so I went home and I was washing my hands, and I heard my little spirit voice say, you don't really want to be the limit of someone else's, you don't want to be the vision of someone else's limitation.
No.
And I said, okay, don't need an agent. Let me go do what I'm supposed to do, because somehow, some way, the path will open up. And each step of the way since then, what I've been getting is people are sent to me, stories I get to work on. I revised the Oracle Files Escape won in 2019 the New Hampshire Literary Awards for Outstanding Work of Fiction, which I will tell you, I got up every morning at 4:30 and worked on trying to clean up typos, make it better, tighter. And years later, I ripped it apart again. And this is the benefit of being a self-publisher. And now I have something that someone has grabbed and said, I'm sending it to my literary agent. And because I think this is what it is, and I won't say what he said because it's beyond immodest, but I was like stunned, but I said, no, this is what I worked for. So let go and let him do what he sees, because he knows what my work is and he knows who I am. But the bottom line is, my publishing company, the route that I've chosen to take is to be myself and to publish stories that have no corners, no walls, no boxes, because I'm bored. I get bored very easily. I've heard so much, but the aspect of being intuitive or psychic or whatever, being a medium, it just changes your whole perspective. And also the ability to tell a story, which I already came into before I really opened up intuitively. So
Well,
I just, go ahead.
I think that that is such a unique perspective that you're offering an author, and that will speak to those people. There are those that'll speak to different people, and they won't even know that you exist. But something like this, you share that information, and that's going to connect with them on a psychic level. They're going to say, finally, someone is speaking my language. And I
actually have had a client that I'm working on now. It's a twofer. It's a memoir, a biography inside of a memoir. And it's about a famous colonel here in the state of New Hampshire, and his grandson has retraced his path because he wanted to find he's this famous guy. And so, as it turns out, my gift of mediumship comes in handy, because I'll get information from his mother, who's French, from Algiers. I'll get information from his grandfather, and I'll say things. I'll write things that he's never told me, and he said, I didn't tell you that. I said, no, I think this was channeled. So the gift of having that ability to apply it in a writing form is just something to me that is more expansive than I would have ever been able to allow to be if I was under an agent's thumb or in a publishing forum where they said, well, she has to fit in this box. Oh, child, there's no box to hold me.
No, no, absolutely. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We're a little bit past due, but please give me some information about Ingram Sparks, publishing on Amazon. Those are absolutely free. It costs nothing to publish on them. What are your thoughts on them?
I always choose Ingram Sparks because I feel that I've learned through other authors that Amazon, in terms of its distribution, has a limitation for the author. Anything that I think will limit the author, I will always advise to stay clear of. People can choose Amazon if they want. I will not. On top of which, they make a lot of money off of our books, and they can decide the price whatever they want. With Ingram Sparks, you upload, you are in control of your own pricing. You can they have marketing information that you can get and learn about to help yourself. And New Hampshire Writers Project, we have a marketing service to help the author. But my tendency is to go with Ingram Sparks. And I know that they're undergoing a lot of restructuring because once upon a time they had a 1-800 number, and it was fabulous to call and say, I have this problem, and they would fix it instantly. Now they've lost chatting, everything, because of COVID. So I'm hoping they'll get that back, but that would be my choice, to tell everybody to keep your power.
Keep your power. And it doesn't cost anything. Like you say, you buy your own copies. I went Amazon on some children's books. You upload them, they're free. And then all you do is then buy copies at a reduced price as the author. And it was what I needed for Christmas presents when I was writing children's books for my grandchildren.
No, and that's the thing. A lot of people love Amazon. I just remember my book that was $17 or whatever, and one day I got a something for like $3 from them, and I said, "Wait, what? What's going on?" And I was used to getting 10.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's all about what type of control you want to have over your product, and I advocate for all writers to maintain control. Don't give anything away for free. And one last thing for writers, that ebooks, when you have a book that you want to just publish as an ebook, go to Draft to Digital. You can upload for free, and they will even take the Word document and they will upload and they will transfer it into an EPUB. So all that you have to do is upload it. It doesn't cost you anything. They also, so they cover all, it's an aggregate. So any ebook like was it the book, the Nook, Kobo, all those types of books,
Right, right,
ebook.
right.
Yeah, they're all there. And you can choose which one you'd like your book to be published through or someone can purchase through. Additionally, they also deal with libraries, so you can select that. And they just have a whole array of outlets for your book, for your EPUB book. So I highly recommend Draft to Digital over Amazon.
Got it. And then again, it doesn't have to cost you anything if you want to be a published author. So,
Nope.
okay, I'm 10 minutes late here, but I thought that was all great information. And it's time that we switch over to the chat portion. I thought Montana was going to be reading the questions. I'm not sure if that's still
Sure.
a fact or not. Is it Montana? Are you there?
Disembodied voice Montana is still in the background here.
Oh, he's got such a nice voice, doesn't he?
It works well for radio. There you
All
go.
right. Yeah.
So here we go. We do have a few questions from the audience, very engaged audience. 20 Lil H asks, is the book out and where can I find it? And I'm just going to say that's for everybody. Go.
Jean, your book is out, right?
Yes, jeanduffy.com is my website. And if you go there, there's a big buy the book and,
Yeah.
different outlets you can buy it.
And Bev?
Yeah, so I mean, you can buy it from OR Books with shipping, I think, but you can also buy it at Amazon and in bookstores. It's in a lot of bookstores, and if it's not, ask them to stock it. Then you can get it in the libraries, and if it's not, ask them to get one.
Yeah, yeah. And Laura, yours is out in November?
Hopefully November. Yeah, watch for go to my website, lauraberetsky.com. And I will post it, sell it from there. I will post an announcement and sell it from there. Sign up for my newsletter. I'll send you an email when it's released, and hopefully that's sometime next month.
And Mashra, your book is available through your own site, is that correct?
It's available through Portal Store Publishing, as well as it's on Amazon, but unfortunately there's some issue where they just have the 2019 version and not the 2023 third edition. That's what people want to buy, but Gibson's also has it, and I can send, if you go to Portal Store Publishing, I will send you a signed copy.
Oh, fun. And Gibson's is like the best. They are the best for any small public, for any author. They're just there for you. So, okay, Montana, and what's our next question, please?
So let's see here. Next question came from let's go Rich Banachar. We got what are the pros and cons of publishing with Amazon? I think you already went over a bunch of this, but I'd like to hear kind of a more from everybody. Pros and cons of Amazon.
I said my piece.
Okay, and I'll say mine. I went Amazon and for my children's books, and I found it easy, and they did a good job. It was free. I could buy copies for I could buy copies for $4.99 of my little children's books that I was putting out. So it was kind of like what is that, the drug that gets you into the bigger drugs, like gateway drug, so to speak. But because then you want to get into a publisher or an independent publisher, or it makes you move along. So I'm not afraid of Amazon, and it serves its purpose, but that's all it does. It serves its purpose. And you've heard different ways that you can publish, and that is query, and go after it. Okay. All right. Anybody else want to bring in on Amazon or not? We good? Okay. Next up, Montana.
Next up, what's the most cost-effective method of publishing? This is from Salma.
Well, Jean, what did it cost you in regards to, what did you have to pay?
I did not pay anything to the publisher, but I paid for consultants to help me work on the manuscript, classes.
Same thing, Bev. You did you pay anything?
No, I didn't, but I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, why did I go with anybody? I wish I had taken this class and listened to this conference and listened to this Zoom conversation, because I mean, the percentages that we get are not that high. So if you
Nope.
have a $22 book, you might get $2.
Yeah,
If you're lucky.
Yes.
yeah, exactly, if you're
Yeah.
lucky.
I've heard some things about Amazon. I'm not clear what people are saying, but they're taking more or charging less, as you said, Masheri. And I'm not clear. I do want to ask you maybe to clarify for everyone, Bev. So for Amazon, like the children's books, do you design the cover and tell them, and they print everything there for you?
I designed everything and uploaded it. I had my cover, and which was really hard to maneuver through KDP.
Yeah.
And you upload the inside of the book, and they send you a proof within probably 10 minutes. They'll send you a proof of the book, and then you can make changes or what have you, or you can say, okay, it's good, let's go, and they'll move it into the printing part. And
I tried the KDP thing way back, probably a few years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just not great with that stuff. So, I mean, I think people can probably get a friend who's tech savvy to help them with it and do
Yeah.
it that way. It sounds like a good option.
yeah, so or Ingram Spark is what Masheri was saying, that they also do it. Barnes and Noble has its own printing part also, and they all offer a little bit of different zhuzh to go along with what they're doing. So, okay, up next.
Up next, we have one from Deborah LeClaire. She says, now this is for, she called out Masheri specifically, but I think if you have something to say, by all means, add it. We need spiritual books, exclamation point. Do you think or intuit there is a future for spiritual fiction?
There is now, because that's what I'm doing. And I'm not waiting for someone to say that that's trending. I want it to be the trend. So I think it's your choice, but I'm choosing to make it something that I want to focus on because I know that we need it. And I think it's just the next step up from all of the intuitives and psychic readings and psychics that have been going around. And they do write their own books, but a lot of them are nonfiction. But yes, I feel it's going to have an impact probably in another year or two. That's a psychic read. I was just told.
Interesting. Okay. And an intuitive consultant, what is that, please?
For me, I am gifted that I can feel like an empath. I can walk into a room and feel things, etc. But I can also do past lives. I can look at you just from your breath or your words. I can hear and I get images of things that have happened. And if you're stuck in something, I can see why you're stuck in it or what the purpose of it was so that you can learn from it, just move on. So being intuitive is just being open to that third veil, that which you cannot see, but you can hear, but they've taught me how to feel. So that's what I've learned to do, is how to feel. I can smell sometimes, and you've been at the board meetings when someone's been in my space, and I'll turn and say, get out, because I smell cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I'm like choking, I can't even talk. So being an intuitive for me is about being open and receptive to everything that you cannot see, hear, or smell, or touch, but you know it's there.
Yeah. If we would just listen to that small inner voice that we have, and you know it's there, but we don't always listen to it. And I think it's a really fascinating part of who you are, and it's why you've guided the Writers Project to such success as well, I believe. So
I know that I'm the guardian of that. That's why I came here. There's not a doubt in my mind. So I feel very blessed. And everyone has it. It's just that we've been conditioned not to listen to it.
Right, exactly.
I would like to add a little something to that. you know, you'd be surprised what's embedded in a book like Chomsky and Me.
Mhm.
I have a chapter and I have several instances in my book about this kind of spiritual thing that happened. One of my chapters is about an extraordinary thing that happened to me that I wasn't going to put into the book because people say, oh, I'm going to put her, you know, that doesn't sound quite, you know, normal or whatever. So I think you'd be surprised in some books like Chomsky and Me, where you will see some spiritual thing that happened that was psychic, intuitive, call it what you want. That can't be
Exactly.
explained after my mother died. And I decided I'm putting it in the book.
Good for you.
Well,
Good
yeah.
for
Well
you.
done. Yeah. Well, he is a cognitive scientist. So doesn't that connect in some way also with what you're both are talking about? Cognition of recognizing what's going on around you or within you?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, what happened to me wasn't in the office, but when I did go back and tell Noam about it,
Mhm.
and maybe it was because he's also a cognitive scientist, but he's not actually very into spirituality.
Yeah.
But he had
Mhm.
just seen something after his wife died. He saw some spirits were called in when they dedicated this forest to her in Colombia. And so that had just happened. And so when I told him what happened to me at the medical department, he said, I can believe anything now. And that was about the only time I ever heard him talk about, you know, as a scientist, he talked about it and admitted that he
Mhm.
would believe it. So that was, thank you, my Sherry. I want a session with you.
Oh,
She's
well,
amazing. She's an amazing person.
I know I've met her and she is.
Mm.
well, I just wanted to say to Laura very quickly that part of being epileptic is also about being in that realm. Just as being autistic, I actually had an autistic boy who was channeling to me, and I had information. I was like, who is this? And it turns out that they were connected to the client that I was going to have later that day. And I said, oh, okay, so he wants to say X, Y, and Z, and that he wants a skateboard back. And I said, does that make sense to you? She said, that's my nephew. And his father took his skateboard away from him because he tripped over it and he fell and broke his leg and blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, so now we know this kid. And so I want to say to you, Laura, that in those moments, those are that flashing in and out of that realm. So that high electrical connection, if you will, because that's all electronic impulses, correct?
Well,
Majority.
it's disconnection.
Well,
But yeah,
but
it's
see, it's
misfiring.
without getting into a session, it's making an effort to connect. That's
Mhm.
what's happening, because it's taking you out of one to put you into another. And so the flashing that's that in between that's where, and I'm saying that to you now so that when you have that, you think about it
Mm.
a little bit more and take command of it.
Interesting.
Mm,
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
No worries. I love it. This is
Very
a great
interesting.
conversation. Montana, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one for the group from Salma. How do you capture raw emotion like anger or sadness when you're writing?
Who wants to handle that one? Okay, go right ahead.
Truth.
Yeah.
You don't minimize the truth, because if you minimize the truth, you're flattening the moment.
Yeah.
And so I always say we just have to make sure we give you just enough without beating someone up, you know, so they don't feel exhausted by it. But anger can be used to provide an insight, a means of protection. It can be used to be righteous and to be declarative for a statement that needs to be heard, you know. So yeah.
Well, I know that in my writing, I have had times that it wasn't anger, it was abject sadness, that I'll weeping as I'm writing, and I'm thinking, this is great. And then, but it's, it was really an emotional place I was with one of my books. So you got to throw everything you have into it. You have to. And now, like Sherry says, honesty, right?
Yeah, and the other thing about that I teach is that when you use that kind of raw emotion, you have to use it, sculpt it to some extent, because if you just regurgitate everything out, no one can hear the message that you're trying to deliver. So I say pour it all out, and then we'll kind of sort through what it is you put out there, and really emphasize the part on those moments, or that bit of information that is really crucial.
Well, that goes back to getting a good editor too, an editor you can work with.
And that's another cost that writers should know about,
Exactly.
is an editor. And there's also the cost of book cover. They do have some places where you can go and get a book cover for $39 or something like that, but that's still a cost. But the editor is probably one of the most expensive aspects of publishing, self-publishing. And even for traditional publishing companies, I don't know if everybody knows this, but they've let go of a lot of editors, and the ones that are there are completely burnt out. And so they don't edit everything that, particularly if the writer is good. I've heard a story from a professional writer who said for whatever reason, he worked on his piece until he felt that it was done, and he felt good about releasing it, and it went right to press. And he was expecting it to be edited, and the publisher said, well, no one's going to know the difference. I wish you would do that to me.
Jean, did you pay an editor for your book, or did that come with your book?
No, I had some help editing early on, and also at the end, but I hired that myself.
And what was the cost on that, Jean?
Oh gosh,
Ballpark.
1,500, 2,000.
Oh.
Yeah.
How
I
many
also paid
pages?
that.
How many pages?
It's 75,000 words.
Okay.
And the same for me. I paid about $1,500 over 9 months. And but then when I got that was free publisher. And then when he put me in touch with the publisher, the same guy worked with the publisher for free. I didn't have to pay him. And we worked together for about 4 months.
Wow.
Because the publisher's always going to want new edits as well.
And they're always going to want their photos as opposed to the ones you want. And there's a lot of the things that you have to negotiate. And I say negotiate. I say stand up for what you want in the book, and make little concessions here and there, because they know better about some things, but you really have to hold on to what your vision is for the book, and make sure. I had some pictures in, I insisted on them, and I'm so glad I did.
Good.
Things
Good.
like that. Yeah.
All right.
Could I just wanted to
Go right ahead, Laura. Go
to
right
add
ahead.
to the emotion, to capturing emotion. I totally second what Masherie said about truth, and also just getting it down on the page, free writing, just get it down. But then I also did a lot of crafting and shaping, using analogies and metaphors. I found there was a book, it was called, I think, The Emotional Craft of Writing, maybe, by Maas was the last name, M-A-A-S. I found that very helpful, actually, in terms of trying to capture after the free write, and after it was all down, and then trying to put it on the page in a way the reader could really feel it, take it in. I found that really helpful.
Absolutely. I just got a text from somebody in the audience said Kafka must be a quote from Kafka. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. Take an axe to that frozen sea. Work, let it out, let it out. All right. Last question, Montana, or are we good?
We've got one more. I just had a quick technical one. Hold on a second.
Okay,
KDP is Kindle Direct Publishing. Did I get that right?
correct.
Perfect. And the last question is, I'm a 69-year-old retired steelworker. How can I save my work from being passed over because of a non-writing background? And this is from Rich Banichar again.
Okay, save his work from being passed over. I don't understand. Is he saying
He's a non-writer, and he's worried he's going to be passed over for publishing? But I think maybe self-publishing is kind of prevents that from being.
That would probably be the best thing. And if he comes into, if he's a member of New Hampshire Writers Project, we have a write-in. I believe it's on November 4th, which is a Saturday at the Ford House. That's free for members. I'm going to be there and offering my story guide services for people who are stuck or need, you know, a little push to get started. So if he shows up, I can take a look at his work and give him some feedback.
Well, and you know what I would like to say to Rich, who's a friend of mine, and he's in Ohio. I would say, you know, I want to almost swear, who cares if you worked in the factory and now you're writing because you're retired? Who cares? It's the words on the page that matter. And then those words, if they connect with somebody, then that's the secret sauce. You got to get the words on the page and then find those, like Jean found soccer people, and Bev found fans of Gnome, and Laura found people who deal with epilepsy, and Cherie intuits a lot of all of this herself already. So go on. You know, what did you just say? Don't put me, Cherie, don't put me in
a box.
That's right.
Nope. But I want to say to Rich also, Rich, I think that your background gives you the opportunity for a particular voice, very unique voice that I think would be wonderful for a story and a perspective. So I would probably work with you to coach that voice and have you talk as you talk, so that you don't have to change yourself. We just have to get you onto the page, help you get yourself onto the page.
And I think there's a memoir in there about working in a steel factory in a small town.
It's a life. That's a life.
That's a life. It's a life. And you worked your way out of certain places too. It's your story to tell, but anyway, okay. It's 8:31 or 8:30 that I have. Last thing I'd like you to do, Cherie, is just give us what's upcoming at the Writers Project. What do you have on deck for the last quarter of the year?
Oh, so for now, we have a couple of classes that are coming up. On this Saturday, we have David Maloney's What's in a Plot, and he is the creative writing director for SNU, and he'll be talking about all the components needed to create a great plot line. We have Critique Partners Matchup on November 4th. Again, we have the write-in coming up. I believe it's on November 11th. I think we're doing that in the morning. Everybody can check our website for our class schedules and what we're offering.
Yeah, and I am a big fan of the partnering up with another writer. What did you call it again, Masha?
The Critique Partner Matchup. We're now doing groups. We used to do singular people. We can do both. There are groups that already exist and will show up and say, we need 1 or 2 more people. And sometimes there are people who say, you know, I just want to work with 1 person or 2 or 3 people. So, I mean, we are flexible. We bend like Gumby.
Just like Gumby. All right. So are there any final thoughts that anybody is bursting to say or share?
Just be yourselves, people.
Yeah.
Just be yourselves and say it how you mean it. You don't have to try to sound like a writer. I'm always trying to talk I feel sometimes I have to retrain people to just be themselves and not try to sound like a writer, because you sound very cliche.
No. Okay, be yourself. Okay, so I'm going to say our time is up. We did pretty good. I've got 8:32, and so we're staying on time. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. I just feel that I found new friends. I have another friend that I continue to admire, and it's a lovely universe to travel in, because we're all trying to do the same thing. And so I'll say thank you so much, and it's been wonderful. And from InDepthNH.org and the New Hampshire Writers Project, we will say good night for now then.